Okay. Well, please say you're here because it's the law. Councilor Gilmore.
I'm here.
Great. Councilor Forgy.
Here.
Councilor Wheeler.
Here.
Aaron.
Present.
John.
Here.
Alan. Unmute Alan, please. All right, we see him. And David here. Alan, you're on. Let's see if we can hear you.
Yes, I'm here.
Great. Thank you. Great. All right, I read the minutes. I didn't read them the first day I got them, but I read them a couple of days ago. I'd like to, if the committee's okay, just hold off for another month, enough for the next meeting. I want to review. I want to add a little meat to the bones of the minutes. I think it's a little thin. No offense to you, Tammy, who's going to be listening to this meeting. You have a lot of work to do, and it's not on you. It's on me to review them. So thank you so much for what you did. But I'd like to add a little bit to it, just so the public could see a little bit more of what we're up to. No public hearings, no motions. Okay, so we start a little later, and I'm willing. We could do one section this time, not have to take it into too late. We'll see how we go. But I'd like to go to section 6. And I know that's Councilor Forgy's section. And just start with this, Chris. I saw, is it Lisa who's the recreation department head? Christy, sorry. And I think she told me that she's putting something in the pipeline around her committee and wanting it to be more in, something to be in the charter. So I don't know if you've received anything. I have not. So just to have a heads up, and I asked her to please get it to us sooner than later. So.
Okay.
All right. Okay. Take it away, please.
Okay. So Article 6, Administrative Organization. I reviewed section 6.1 A, B, C. I found no suggested changes. And I don't know if other folks agree or disagree with that, but I think those pieces of 6-1 are okay and ready to go.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
6.2 is merit principle. The only possible language change on that would be something to the effect that we would add after the word it's on the basis of merit and fitness demonstrated by examination, education, and certification are the words that I put in there, or by any other evidence of competence and suitability. Don't know if that makes sense, if you think the second half of that sentence covers all of that. I just thought with people within the town, working for the town, education and certification is really important.
Interesting. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Anybody have any comments on that? Okay, good. Good suggestion.
Okay. 6.3, Department of Municipal Finance. These are basic. So A, I had no comments and found nothing to disagree with. B, Director of Municipal Finance, same thing. So that was section 6.3. Okay, section 6.4, Department of Planning and Development. A, the only thing I was looking for was a little bit more clarification. Top of the page on, oh, you guys are working from different, I'm sorry. After the words home rule charter were performed by or under the authority of the planning board, I would put in the word zoning board of appeals. I would add that to be consistent with everything else we have in Greenfield.
Thank
Even
you.
instead of Board of Appeals, you would add in zoning Board of Appeals?
That's correct. Okay. On B, Director of Planning and Development, no changes there. Okay, section 6.5, Assistant to the Mayor for Economic Development and Marketing. I know that when I was mayor, I did make use of this section of the charter. I'm not sure what the last mayor did. And for some folks, it might seem redundant, but as we get a little bit more into economic development and marketing of Greenfield, I think it's important that the mayor has support. So I guess I'm arguing to leave this language alone.
Yeah, I can. You're going to move on. I can just speak to that as in the original group.
Okay.
Imagine, so we had a board of selectmen and town administrator, and the town administrator really had all the hats. And so the town administrator, I think that person's job was to help with economic development by advising through his or her professionalism, the select board on how to proceed. But when we got to the strong mayor, we thought that, the mayor would have to champion everything. And economic development was seen as like the number one issue. So we felt like it was important to have this in the charter so that there would be no question about the mayor hiring somebody to do this and having a salary with this person in charge, so that it would be a very, very strong commitment to that. So I'm glad you brought it up specifically, but that was the reason it's in there. I know that Mayor Forgy, you have, and actually Mayor Martin had a person in there, Bob, what was his last name? But he left, and I don't think that the mayor appointed anybody per se. I think the mayor relied on Lane. And so we didn't get a separate person to come in. So just so you all know, that's the history of it. It looks like, I would wonder, anybody have any problem with that language staying in? Yes, Otis.
I don't have a problem with it staying in. I just wanted to point out that MJ Adams holds the title of Director of Community and Economic Development. So the title is slightly different, but it's certainly related, and she's held that over the past two administrations.
Yes, John.
I can tell you Otis is right, and that's because there hasn't been the funding for a standalone economic development person for years. I actually had a very brief stint as the Director of Special Projects and Economic Development. MJ's title comes from the fact that a chunk of her salary is paid through Community Development Block Grant. So there hasn't been a standalone one for, gosh, I'm going to say 4 or 5 years. 5 years since Bob
Pyers.
Pyers.
I think it's Bob Pyers.
Bob Pyers, yeah.
Thank you.
Because there hasn't been the funding for it.
So I guess then that would raise the question, should the word be shall?
Well, I think we want to allow flexibility depending upon, how things are, especially right now while we're in a pandemic. It feels like we need as much flexibility as possible. I don't think that Roxanne has wavered in her commitment to economic development, so I'm not concerned about that. And I think like moving forward, anybody, if they're listening to their constituents, will know what the number one complaint is, the vacant storefronts. And I, hope it doesn't get too bad after this is all over, but I'm sure it's not going to be a rosy picture.
Okay. The only reason I wanted to put in there a shall is that, again, going back to I'm back in 2001. I'm not here today. So the feeling was that person was so critical, but we were afraid to put shall because we wanted the charter to pass, and we didn't want to add another major salary to the charter. So that's the reason I ask it. Is it's not a question you have to answer the second, but It's just the idea that by saying shall, it means that the government will include that person. All else being equal, and even relating to what you were saying, Sheila. Have both the mayor and another executive person in there that has that expertise. Again, I'm just relating to you the transitional sentiment does not mean anything now unless I can gather all of you to feel the same sentiment about why that was even in there in the first place. So, but yes, I appreciate what everybody's saying about giving the mayor discretion, and at least it's in there, so that's a good thing. I don't think anybody wants to get rid of it. Okay. There are no other questions or comments. Chris, please.
Section 6.6, which is Department of Central Maintenance. My question is, do we leave it there for future, or since we have gone ahead and changed this dynamic and put central maintenance back within the purview of DPW, how do people feel about this particular issue? Shall we remove this section?
So I have a historical context, and if nobody, I can give you a historical context. So at the same time that the city was moving to change its charter, the select board appointed a committee, a maintenance committee, to make recommendations to the government. But by the time our committee got its recommendations together, the government was changing. So that's why it's referenced to the committee's recommendations. So there's a little bit of something here that I want to explain to everybody, just because I think it's important for, I want to bleh out what I know so that you all know it. Who's the past superintendent who?
John Bean. John Bean?
No. Oh, the superintendent of schools. I'm so embarrassed. Who gave us a long memo about the school committee stuff?
Susan Holland.
I'm sorry, Susan. She's right. Under state law, schools have control over the physical buildings of the school system. Included in their budget, year in and year out, was money to repair and maintain the buildings. Because of the school funding problems, we never spent that money on maintaining the buildings. So there was a lot of things tangentially, especially like the football locker room and the other thing that were falling apart, including schools, portions of schools. So we learned from another community that what they did was, to overcome the law, the school department and the city department made a pact and an agreement, and that the school committee actually had to vote, which I believe they did in our case, to allow the money that was coming from the state that was supposed to flow into the school committee's side of the ledger to stay on the town side, with the school side having the right to be part of a team that was going to decide what to do. So like Otis and his group have to think of capital improvements on the city side. Capital improvements would also be discussed for the school side, and the school side would participate. And so that's the legal mechanism of doing it. I think, Mayor, I don't think you, Mayor, I don't know. You tell me whether you participated in that, but I do know that ultimately Mayor Martin created something called the Central Maintenance Group.
Yeah,
I don't know if a vote actually took place through the school committee or not to allow that to happen, but so we actually did the thing we were supposed to do, and that's what central maintenance is. It's a blending of our maintenance funds with the school committee's maintenance funds, and now there's one place that considers it so that the schools didn't fall to pieces. So that's, and Susan's concern about the school committee still having control over the physical plant, I don't know what that means in relation to this. I don't know the answer to it. So maybe Chris, you have some insights into that.
This was in the works as I was leaving office, and the next mayor coming in. The thing I wondered about at this point now, since we've already voted the Central Maintenance Department to go back within DPW, is what happens to that money? I mean, what is the financial piece here in regard to the school? Did they break the money out? Did they just put the department? Is it a structural change, or is it a financial change at this point? I don't know.
Okay.
Otis, do you know anything about that? No. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's just been happening, and when Susan mentioned it, see, the state law says that the schools that's like back to the 19th century or the 18th century, when we were first establishing our system. The colonies did that, and so anyway, it's important. I don't know if we need to go back to. I mean, I don't know what to do with it, but if do we believe there is a Department of Central Maintenance or there is not?
There
It's
currently
under
is not.
DPW.
It's with the
But-
DPW.
Yeah, they got reorged under the DPW.
Right.
It was an ordinance. It was ordinance piece. It went to appointments and ordinances.
So there was a Department of Central Maintenance, and the city council changed it.
Through ordinance.
Yes, and we were not aware of the charter requirement. It didn't come from, it was, DPW and City Hall's idea to change it.
So at this point, the charter and ordinances are in conflict, and we either have to remove that section of the charter, or we have to tell City Hall that they have to have a separate department.
Well, again, the history I'm giving you is because it's a big deal what this is. This is a big deal. This isn't just like let's form a committee and name it. This is an overriding of state law voluntarily by the school side to allow its money to flow into to allow a separate group of people to spend that money without the school committee spending the money directly. School committee has deferred. I mean, I could be wrong about the facts, but that's.
David, are you sure? I'm not. I don't mean to, because there's a bunch of differences in what school committees in the past have directly controlled in terms of maintenance, in terms of day-to-day maintenance of schools. And you may be right. I'm not questioning you. I'm saying I'm not sure where the line between the things that schools control directly and things that they used to sub out to central maintenance would be. And I'm not sure if central maintenance coming under the aegis of DPW how that would change that relationship. You may be entirely right, but I'm not really sure what explain to me what you think is changing again, because I don't get it.
I'll do that in a second. Sheila?
So I think it's really important that we get an answer to the question that Chris just brought up about like, where's this money? Like, we want to make sure that it's happening in a nice, legal, transparent process. But one of the things that I had in my notes when we went through this the first time is I put in quotes as provided by ordinance. So that might be a way to kind of like marry the two processes a little bit better. But recognizing that we definitely need to tie up those loose ends and make sure that this money's being spent properly. I don't think we want to get into it with the state about school funding if we're doing something wrong.
Okay, Chris?
Why don't we just table this section for right now? Because I think it needs a little bit more research. And I would be willing to go ahead and do the research on this piece and just report back at our next meeting. Give you some of the background and the history, and we can make a decision from there.
All right, John, I will explain though, before we move on, what I know.
Okay, I just wanted to ask Chris, if you're going to be looking into that. My understanding, which could be wrong, is that central maintenance sort of just moved under, it hasn't been disbanded. It still exists as an entity. It just reports, instead of directly to the mayor, it reports to the head of DPW. Would that have any effect on its relationship with the schools? I don't remember anything in the charter, and I don't remember anything in ordinance about the sort of day-to-day implementation of how that money gets spent. So I guess my question is, if you're moving the department that still exists, George Vandelinder is still heading up central maintenance. He just now reports to Marla Warner instead of to Roxanne. So what change is that really, or is this a distinction without a difference? I have no idea, but I think that's probably a good question to ask.
So let me guide you, Chris, with this answer. Remember, the charter is the Constitution to be changed by a much harder process than an ordinance.
Right.
If I may.
So the reason it's who's one? Oh, Otis.
Sorry,
I'm sorry.
go ahead.
Want me to continue? Okay. So the point was the arcane nature of the fact that money was flowing into the school system for maintenance and the fact that the schools were not spending it, but lawfully, really, over time, it was harming the city. The goal was to have the school committee, and I'll use Sheila's wonderful words, transparently, knowingly, vote. And Chris, you were on, it would have happened during your term, or it could have maybe happened, or maybe it never happened. But it was supposed to happen that the school committee would vote to allow their portion of the state funding to go into the maintenance fund, along with whatever was there from the city. And there would be a coordinated effort that included members of the school side. That money had to go to the school side every year. That the town couldn't take the maintenance money and use it for their own maintenance and ignore the schools. So that's the legal undercurrent of it. Now, it could be on a practical level that central maintenance has evolved into a group that actually does that in a wonderful way and doesn't really know anymore what the legal history is of how they got there. But I would recommend that we put something that if you take it out of the charter, there could be, something could come up later where nobody understands why all of a sudden we're back. This town there was a lot of mistrust. Really wasn't until Chris came in and we had a mayor. There was so much distrust between the school side and the public side about spending money. I mean, it was horrible. And this was something that was meant to kind of, from an independent group, tell the school committee it's okay to do this because other towns have done this. It's okay to do this if the town allows you to participate. So let's examine that. But in general, I would recommend not getting rid of this department, even if it's merged, just having it brought in to say it could also be a department of DPW. There's a lot of ways in which we can expand the concept and do what is today. But so I think by luck, we've gotten to a good place. Yes, John.
Yeah, all it says is that there shall be a department of central maintenance. The only change that I understand, Otis, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is just who they report to. There's still a department of central maintenance. It just reports now to the DPW instead of the mayor. So according to the strict letter of what's written, it's possible that there needs to be no change at all.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with John. I think John is correct in that assessment. We may have overstated the degree to which this was a change. And I can't remember if it was actually an ordinance change. I know it came to council for approval, but it may have been during budget season. And we do approve have continued to approve the central maintenance budget. Like John said, it's just that it's under Marlo Warner now.
Yeah.
So it may still be in compliance.
Well, it's interesting, because that it should be based on the Central Maintenance Committee, which was this committee that was formed 19 years ago. It's their recommendation. So I have to admit, I actually gave it to her, Bill. I gave what I had, and I said, this is for you to figure it out. So maybe Chris is right. It would be nice if Chris looped back. And Chris, I'll join you in this in terms of trying to see what the history is. But maybe you're right, Otis and Sheila, so you don't have to worry so much. Maybe everything is happening properly, but it'd be nice if you all understood why it's there so that you can continue the understanding that money comes from the school per their permission, not because we're entitled to, not because the town side's entitled or city side's entitled to it. If you understand that much, then you'll be sensitive to any complaints by the school side that they're not getting their fair share of maintenance.
Mhm.
Okay, good. Thanks for letting me pontificate. Okay, Chris.
Section 6-7, planning and construction of municipal buildings and other facilities. I did not find anything with the language, and the only suggestion we had for language change came from a member of the planning board who wondered if it didn't make sense for us to include within those 7 members a representative from the planning board, so that there would be a crossover piece between the planning and construction, the planning stage of municipal buildings and other facilities. So I want to take just a moment, if I can, right now. A lot of the things that I've come across have actually been language changes that are very welcome ideas to think about, but sometimes there's a confusion between charter and ordinance. So I just want to remind people as we move forward that a lot of people are looking for the minutia to be included in the Constitution when actually it's ordinance pieces. So if anybody's got any suggestions on this, I just felt like it was okay the way it was, but the planning board did put, a member of the planning board did put a request in.
And I could be making this up, but my memory is that the school committee person being in there was to have somebody in the hen house looking over the projects to make sure that the schools were part of the planning. So,
right.
Okay. Yeah, I think you're right. I think, if you did a member of the planning board, it wouldn't be a bad idea just to force the planning board to sort of do that. But it could be by ordinance. There is no reason that it can't be by ordinance. It just means it's perpetual. It's a perpetual. It's an idea that will come and go if it's in an ordinance. So I think that's it. So we could put in, we could leave it to the council to decide, actually,
There was we received one email about this from Jean Wall back in the summer.
Yeah.
You remember that? She pointed out that the Planning and Construction Committee, while the charter says that it shall be responsible for monitoring physical condition and a bunch of other things, that she said that in practice, the mayor holds a lot of that responsibility. So she suggested the word share in responsibility or something to that effect. But I just wanted to flag that so that the email, would be part of our record here.
Thank you.
So don't we also have, like, in the section about the mayor, saying that the mayor serves as an ex officio member on all of these committees? So maybe that's fine.
Yeah, the mayor is a member of every multi-member body in an ex officio capacity and can vote and can take part in everything.
Yeah, so if the mayor is doing this, or if, there's a mayor who decides they want to delegate it to someone else because everyone's going to have their own style, I think that leaving it flexible here is probably good.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay. The other thing is that I thought you were going to say is that in effect now, every time we've had a building project, we've had a independent building committee.
Mm-hmm.
At least the high school, the library, the fire station, Darius. Other, so I wonder if maybe I wonder if a sentence should be added. I don't know how. I don't know. Because it says whenever, so maybe it's unless something else happens. I don't know. This last sentence in B.
So you're saying like that this is the process unless the mayor sets up a special ad hoc group?
Right.
Actually, this I think the intent of this actually was that there would be a standing committee, and maybe that's the word we're looking for to incorporate in here. So, It doesn't say how often, does it say how often they meet? But in my interpretation, I'm thinking this should be a group that's already determined and people serve, just like with every other committee and stuff like that. And they're called upon when the municipality wants to start a new building project. So yep, you're right, David, that this has kind of been overlooked. And I think it's extremely important because it does play back into the maintenance piece as well, in the charter, and trying to keep track and inventory of our buildings and what they need. So I don't know what language I would suggest in here, but I don't even think there's been anybody appointed for this type of for this section. There's no 7 members that I'm aware of. I'm aware of members for library, I'm aware of members for fire, but this has kind of been overlooked.
John, I think there is a committee.
I actually think the more we talk about this, we're really talking about a fundamental change in who has the authority to appoint the committee. So it is kind of a serious issue. It doesn't really seem unclear. It says the committee shall meet from time to time with representative of municipal agencies to evaluate the need for additions, renovations, or remodeling of any existing building or facility, or for the construction of new buildings and other facilities. There's nothing in the charter that says you don't have to have that. You can just appoint something ad hoc for each.
Right.
So and you're right, everything I remember for all new buildings has all been ad hoc for, gosh, Chris, I don't even know how long. But if that's true, then all of those appointments were made in contravention of what the charter says should happen.
Right.
Yeah,
Well-
so maybe it makes sense to have a group of people who, are appointed to these positions for a number of years. They get educated on these topics, and then they come into it with a different perspective than, someone who volunteered their time for the library campaign, but maybe doesn't have this sort of background. No offense to, I know there are some folks here that, are on those committees, but maybe that does make more sense.
There is a committee. There is a planning and construction committee. Jean Wall sits on it. I think that's why she sent that email making the suggestion. Amy McMahon, Joe Rigari, Bill Childs, I think. So that committee does all of these things, I believe. And if I'm interpreting Jean's suggestion correctly, I think the only and this is a place where we've identified an absence in the charter's direction. The Planning and Construction Committee seems like that has all of the responsibilities for building and maintaining these buildings, and they are a standing body. But when the buildings are built, there's always this whether it's called a subcommittee or it's an ad hoc committee, and they're given full charge of the building process. So that does seem like we've identified at least an area of opportunity.
So if I understand you, what you're saying is that if City Hall needed a major renovation, there wouldn't be the City Hall Major Renovation Committee set up to do it. If there was stuff that needed that kind of work, like even if the fire station needed to be rebuilt, not rebuilt, so more or less, refurbished, it might not have required a special committee to have the construction. It goes so far into appropriate. It goes so deep that we appoint. So it's not inconsistent, is what you're saying. This is kind of in there all the time. And the special events require special committees. I have to tell you that this was put in there because of the debacle of the middle school.
Yeah.
Because everybody was caught. So we didn't have anybody in town that was looking at any. I mean, we were just caught. We were caught short-sighted about it. I tell you, it really wasn't. really wasn't our fault that the middle school debacle happened. It was the state law that forced the city to have to go with the lowest bidder, who then ripped us off. So I just want you all to know, it wasn't the stupidity of government. But if there had been people in charge then who could have understood the system better, the advising could have been much deeper, and it could have been helpful. Yes, John.
So who has the authority to determine that an ad hoc body needs to be formed for certain projects but not others? Because the charter doesn't really say that. The charter says the Planning and Construction Committee will be in charge. If someone else is put in charge for a specific, I don't have any problem with it. I'm just saying, where's the language that allows that to happen?
Go ahead, Chris, if you have the answer.
Well, yeah, I think it's the mayor who makes the appointment. This charter reflects a strong mayoral form of government. And so the mayor gets to appoint the people. It does describe what the people should have. It says, in making appointments to the committee, the mayor shall seek persons having experience in fields of architecture. So the way I'm looking at this goes back to another piece in the beginning of section 6, where I believe it's pointed out that the mayor should actually do a flow chart or an organizational chart to show who reports to the mayor, who reports to the council, those kinds of things. But I'm reading this as strong mayor. So I think the mayor is the ultimate authority on all of this.
I was going to say the same thing, that if you look at the bureaucracy, you have the mayor in charge of the board of trustees of the library, who then says to the board of trustees, "This is what I'm gonna do this," and the same thing with the fire department. You know, it seems like it's not spelled out. I think this standing committee, though, again, was there to be a constant advisor to the mayor about the shape of the city, and not be involved in a specific, not jump in. Then they couldn't be advisory. If they were involved in the high school, then they weren't. Committee that helps the mayor see the big picture. Yes, Erin.
Well, I wonder if that, then there's more of a point to say, rather than shall be responsible, should say shall advise or be advisory. And I think that's what the comment, and I think the comment came from John Andrews, the email.
You're right. Thank you.
Who is a member of the Planning and Construction Committee. I think Gene Wall was included on that email.
So what would your suggested language be? Would be in B, the first sentence?
Yeah.
All right, what would that be?
I mean, it could be shall advise the mayor on the physical condition, rather than say we're responsible for monitoring.
If you could add at the end of that sentence, it says municipal buildings and other facilities. And then just put in to advise mayor, or to report back to the mayor, or something like that, so that you're clearly stating the chain back to the mayor.
Wouldn't so shall be responsible for monitoring the condition and advising the mayor. That's what you're saying, Chris, right? Erin's saying the same thing, but I think you're saying, since the word monitoring is the verb for physical condition of the buildings, advising would be the mayor. But does that work for you, Erin? The verb would be monitoring the physical condition and thereafter advising the mayor, or something like that. Okay.
Yeah. I also wonder about the when it says in the next sentence, this is sort of a separate issue, but shall meet from time to time. That sort of vague language seems unhelpful. What does from time to time mean?
Excellent point.
Yeah.
I mean, it does.
It's not a word that encourages them to meet often. It's not a phrase that encourages them to meet often.
I mean, if you meet once every 3 years, is that from time to time? I mean, it's just, so I don't know that we necessarily in a charter need to say they need to meet quarterly, but we could say something like,
We could say at least once a year, right? Or at least twice a year, or
right,
something like that,
or,
right?
you know, regularly scheduled meetings as agreed upon by the committee and the mayor, or I don't know, but from time to time is.
Yeah,
good
it kind of sounds like we don't want to let this committee do anything, and we don't want them to ever actually meet. Other than that, we think they're great. Because the mayor's just going to appoint somebody else anyway. So why are they even here?
Okay. All right, so time to time, add, advise here. Okay. All right, great. Next.
Okay. Section 6.8, Department of Human Resources. I actually did not find any objectionable language or any language that came in for people concerned about this particular standard. So I think we're okay, 6.8 in its entirety.
So
Anything from the school committee side that I don't know all the details of it, but were there HR functions that were combined there that need to be
No, there are
defined?
parallel functions that run. There's been a long-standing effort to try to combine business services and HR services, but it's never gotten to any point that's been able to gain agreement from both sides.
Okay.
Agreed.
I have a little fiddly point. It says the functions of Department of Human Resources shall include the following. Shouldn't it say shall include but not be limited to the following, or do we want them only to be responsible for these things?
I like your language.
It's just a little more flexibility, that's all. I don't know how important it is.
Just remember though, be careful what you wish for. So if it's including but not limited to, where would those, how would the, is there some sort of a generic role that human resources has that this is kind of the broad brush of what they do? There might be other things, or
well, that
do
was
we
my
want to
question.
limit?
I mean, that was my question. This seems like a pretty bare bones sketch of what HR does. So do we want to, I don't want to limit that sort of thinking, are we limiting what they can do? In practice, it hasn't been a problem, so I don't have any problem leaving it. You could say it shall be responsible for and other relevant, I don't know. Maybe I'm opening a can of worms, but the way I read things like that, it says this is what they shall do and nothing else. And I don't know if that's what we want to say or not.
I can add to support what John is suggesting, because the HR director that was in place when I was mayor would also accompany our labor attorney to put in on contract negotiations, because they know what the benefit packages are and the pay scales and things like that. So I can see where this language could expand to meet that purpose.
I don't think it's a problem.
Okay.
Okay, that's fine.
I just think that it shall include means that the duties have to be this.
Okay, That's fine.
I don't think it limits the duties necessarily, but that's fine. So that's why I think the adding of those words will not really change. Just clarify. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks, John. And
Okay, gosh, my charter is all in pieces here. Okay, section
hard.
6.9, Board of License Commissioners. I have to say that I have not taken a look at any of the language that has come in. I know that there's language from the licensing commissions for ordinances, which is the other committee that I sit on. But if anybody has that language that they can pull up, that would be very helpful, but I cannot make a judgment on this because I haven't really researched it.
actually, this is a very powerful committee.
It is extremely powerful.
Plus, what's interesting about it is that if you think about the city, if you think about the town with the select board and the powers that the select board had, so I mean, we take it for granted that the select board did this work along with being the the governing, the executive branch. So
Right.
now all of a sudden we're getting a strong mayor saying, well, the mayor doesn't have time for this. This is not, and it's not a board anyway, so it's a single person. So let's keep it within the board so that people get a chance to sway more than one person and put those responsibilities on some other groups. That's all this really says, is it takes on the tasks of the select board and whatever statute requires. So I think every now and then I get a question about it, but I've always thought that they have broad powers myself. And I mean, the only thing we could do is either clarify them and or restrict them some way. But go ahead, Otis.
Yeah, my comment would actually be that this committee occasionally, how do I put this, expresses dismay at how broad their powers are. And I don't think it's a big problem, but there are absolutely issues that come up that this board kind of punts back to City Hall, because you get things, especially as a precinct councilor, where citizens object to a certain business being operating in a certain district, and the Board of Licensing Commissioners, which has these absurdly long agendas in normal times, can't easily spend 90 minutes mediating some kind of issue between abutters. And so when that's happened, and it's happened multiple times just in my precinct, City Hall essentially tries to work with the board and me. I mean, it's worked okay, but it's definitely an example of I don't know what it's an example of, but it's something that we have wondered about, that I've wondered with both chiefs of staff, whether this is the best way for the board to operate.
John.
I tend to agree with Otis. I think that there's actually, if you look at what ordinances are actually on the books, there's almost nothing. So the transfer of authority from the Board of Selectmen, I agree, David, I think that was what the intent was, but it's not very well documented. And I think if you asked a bunch of people at City Hall, you would get a lot of different answers as to what they actually think the purview of the Licensing Commission is. I think it doesn't help in that occasionally the decisions don't really come within an overall framework of what the city's trying to do. So I think a little better articulation of what those powers actually are would be useful, because I'm not sure you could get anybody who could sit down and accurately tell you what all their powers are. And I think that includes the people on the Licensing Commission. I don't think they're bad. I don't think they're trying to do anything wrong. I just think the whole thing is very unclear.
Yeah. Well, I think this is the enabling statute, more or less. I wouldn't change this in my opinion, but I think that there should be an ordinance that's very detailed.
I actually,
Very detailed about how the licensing commission works. I mean, they're also the ones who deal with the First Amendment stuff, by the way.
That's
Right.
my,
right, right.
And they are beyond understaffed. So
Yes.
we've just appointed this commission to do probably the hardest. I think it's harder than even the boards like planning or zoning, because we just kind of meet once a month and we get a couple of things. Maybe every now and then there's a development. The licensing is the day-to-day bread and butter stuff that goes on in the community. You don't get a license, you don't work.
Right.
I really think that it would behoove the ordinance committee on the council to specially pay attention to the licensing portion of the ordinances and get that down. And I mean, I think you might even have to create a subcommittee to kind of do the research for the group, but that should happen sooner than later. But I'm only saying this for purposes. The charter is just an enabling. It just says we've divided off these responsibilities from the executive branch to a group of people called the licensing commissioners. Now, if somebody thinks we should create other committees or commissions to do the work that the licensing commission does, that would be a charter. Then you use the charter to enable that new group called the commission, but not quite, group, and then you enable them. But if you're going to give the licensing committee all this work, they need a staff. They need a staff to do all this work, and
But
so. Go ahead, John. I'm sorry. That's it.
I'm sorry. I think it's a perfectly valid recommendation from the Charter Commission that this be something that is basically enabled by the charter, but has to be fleshed out by the ordinance committee of the council. I don't think this is something that should be solved or changed at the charter level. But I think it's okay for the Charter Commission to say there are very, very few ordinances on the books that relate to the licensing commission. And given the very general nature of the enabling charter language, there should be more articulation of particular powers and duties.
I think. And I mean, I actually think that should have happened at the 2010 review myself. I mean, if it had to sit around for 8 years to see how it played out, it was 2010 that I think that should have really happened. So, okay, good work. Anything else on this? I think we're all in agreement on this. Okay, go ahead, Chris. Keep going.
Section 610 Recreation Commission. We didn't receive anything. You just mentioned that she was going to send some things over regarding charter. What I've seen so far is all in the ordinance category.
Okay.
Well, I think she would like to see the charter say that there's something called the Recreation Department. That there's something in the charter that recognizes that it's not just a commission. And I don't even know, this could have been, to tell you the truth, just something that we overlooked just because this section, everybody figured, once the mayor got into office, the mayor would see whether these were okay or not, and then go back to the charter commission and say we need to expand. I mean, so I think this section, independent of all the other things that have been are sort of in the headlines about charter changes, this section might, and not the section, the article itself needs to be looked at, and this is a section. So why don't we just put that? Why don't we wait to hear from Christy and see where that goes?
Yes, that sounds
good.
Okay. Okay, so section 6-11 is Public Safety Commission. There hasn't been too much at all coming through on this. I'm a little surprised given everything that our country and our community has been going through in the past 6 months or more. So my first suggestion is that I would like to expand the number of members on that committee to 7. So we have 5 members, and we need 2 alternate members, is what I would like to see. That's my first suggestion. The second is under powers and duties. I wanted the language to include not only the police and fire departments, but EMS. And I was actually toying with the idea, and I don't know how to fit this in, but some of the duties and responsibilities of the Board of Health, which I know has its own standard in the charter, but I'd love to hear what other people think about that. The other, let me just see here. I've got my notes. Hang on just a second. The word in this standard, the word both needs to be changed to all, because I think that now that we add EMS to that, I think that's important. And then,
And where are you seeing?
oh,
where you?
yeah, let me see.
What's section?
Okay, so if you, in section D, powers and duties.
Oh, I see. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I think that it says both departments, and I think it should be all departments that fall under the purview of them. Again, you'll see that if you go to D2, you'll see that as well. And so you'll see that in 3. So all of those I think need to be changed. All right. Some suggestions.
Before you move on. Yeah, there were suggestions made by students, but go ahead, Sheila.
I'm sorry.
I was going to say, yeah, I don't think that the suggestions made by constituents were specifically about the Public Safety Commission. They were talking about setting up an independent review board, which could be 2 separate bodies. But I know that for the independent review board, they don't want retired police officers and retired, public safety workers. They want it to be completely independent. And maybe that is not a board that serves the same function as the Public Safety Commission, because I feel like the Public Safety Commission does a lot about promotions and recommendations and things like that. So we could go either way with it. And I think we should kind of talk about the pros and cons of that.
Okay. I would welcome your input, Sheila, because I know you've been really involved with your community relations group and the feedback that's coming back from that. The one overriding, if everybody would indulge me for just a moment, the very end of this standard is in, let me see, it's in 4-I, and it says commission members shall be special municipal employees. There was a group of constituents that brought this forward, asking for a definition of what special municipal employees are. And basically they said, well, is this somebody, is this a case of divided loyalties? How can you be, taking care of citizen complaints and also taking care of police and fire department needs? So I don't have a really clear answer to that, but I did look up special municipal employee designation policy, which is chapter 268A of general law. And it is used to differentiate between municipal employees receiving compensation from or acting as an agent or an attorney for anybody other than the town. But I can understand why special municipal employees exist if you actually get into language which is in chapter 147, section 44, which is the authority of a commission, and this pertains to public safety commissions, to actually have the authority to summon and acquire attendance and testimony of witnesses as to matters within its jurisdiction. It's also conferred upon city councilors. We have that authority as well. So this is a real interesting standard to me. To me right now, it feels like it needs to be rewritten with an eye to that last sentence, which calls them special municipal employees. So it's a broader interpretation, but also they have the authority to summons.
Sheila, go ahead. I want to respond to what Chris has to say, but you go ahead, Sheila.
I think that maybe the easy answer to that is we put that in the definition section and just say that a special municipal employee has the right to, summon witnesses and and spell that out. And I think that takes care of that whole question.
No, it's
No.
Respectfully. This language is a term of art in the state law, and it distinguishes somebody who's an attorney during the day but sits on the commission at night, or has some other capacity in the world. Maybe in your case, Sheila, like being a representative as you are, and you volunteer for this commission. You're given special status, which actually is you're separated from everybody else in town as an employee in a way that protects you against conflicts of interest or other such things. So if you look up the definition of the state law, it's in there for that reason. Mm-hmm. So it's a term of art that sounds worse than it is, or it sounds different than it is. It's really just there to protect people who do this volunteer work because they're not being paid. These people are not being paid. Mm-hmm. So I don't think it's a bad phrase, but we could put in our comments that we'd like the city lawyer to clarify. Okay, so I'm a lawyer giving my opinion, but I will not give it as the municipal opinion. The other thing is, I respectfully disagree with Chris's interpretation of the power that is given just because the word commission is in our language. Again, I could be wrong, but I think the only body in town that has the right to subpoena is the council, and that's because they've been granted that power. I do not believe that any of these commission, even we call it a commission, and maybe it's like it's a nice, it elevates the status of the people who are on it. But I don't believe that just because the word commissioner is there, that lay people who volunteer in this manner, or even if they are experts, but they're volunteers, have the subpoena power, especially being a volunteer. But I know why Chris said that, and I just disagree with the power that she's inferring to that group. I mean, does the Recreation Commission have the right to subpoena people? So I know that I know pointing you in that direction. So we should answer that question too. So there's two questions. One is the special municipal employee, and the second is, by virtue of us calling something a commission rather than a department, does that automatically create subpoena power in the group? And I'm guessing that the answer to that is no. It's too powerful. It could really be used to. It's just like. But I understand why Chris is saying that, and I'm not saying it. What I'm saying is just to make sure we get to the real answer, not that I'm right and she's wrong. But I just don't think from my experience that that's correct. But regardless, my understanding from talking to Butch Hawkins is that, and again, that's somebody who's been there almost the whole time, is that this committee isn't broke in what it's narrowly supposed to do. Now that may be somebody from inside telling me that, but Sheila, I'm much more interested in what you've been learning from your work. And I like the idea that the Public Safety Commission can continue to do the work that it's described as doing, because, I mean, Chris, you could speak to this better than I can, but I think they're doing an okay job of what they're doing. You know, the complaints I've heard, I haven't heard complaint, but when we get into the issue of independent review,
Mhm.
of course, I think that group would have a really hard time doing that because, you know, they have a working relationship with the police and fire department. And if we're going to add, you know, the other groups, it would be almost impossible. I can't imagine that group being able to hear that kind of complaints. So
Yeah. So
do you have a suggestion? Is there something out there? Are there other charters that have this? Is there something we could draft that, you know, from without
I think
writing?
there are other communities who have drafted something like this, and I can look into that. But I know that my experience on CRE was very different than what I expected it to be. When we, you know, there was, you know, this is something we've been talking about for a long time, but you know, a few months ago we started talking about it. You know, it was kind of like more urgent, and there were some protests downtown, and we had some people who came to the city and they wanted us to have a discussion about this, and they stopped coming. And I think the reason they stopped coming is because they realized that they were not going to find a legislative answer, and that the that municipal government was not going to solve the problem. So I chaired a few meetings where we did have some activists come and they wanted to talk about some issues. The police chief also came. I've had the deputy chief there. I've also had some conversations with, you know, different employees who, you know, I think were, you know, they expected these conversations to be off the record. And I think that the activists felt like we were not going to take up their concerns in a way that was going to be meaningful for them. I think it's really hard if you're going to make an accusation that a police officer, you know, has, you know, is racist or has committed an act of brutality. There's this kind of like culture of silence that we have to get around. Also, if these folks send an email to me because I'm their city councilor, my emails are public record because I'm a city councilor. So it's not like they can go to like talk to a priest in a Catholic church and it's, you know, it's like they're talking to their doctor. They've got privacy. When you're talking to people in town, it's public and people really do worry about retaliation. So these conversations broke down pretty quickly. I think that just kind of shows that having an independent review board could be more valuable. And these people should not be the same folks that sit on the public safety committee or commission. And they probably should not be stacked with retired police officers. If we want people to feel comfortable talking about their experiences, they're gonna need something. And what we're providing them right now is not making them feel comfortable talking to us, and that, you know, it bothers me. I mean, I've always told my constituents that they can talk to me privately and that, you know, I will work on advancing their interests. But, you know, if they don't feel like they can trust us, then they're not going to come to us at all, right? So I don't know if this is a problem that can be solved with the Charter Commission, but that's what I faced on CRE.
Okay, Otis, but I have a question for you, Sheila. Go ahead, Otis, but I have a question. It's like a question of like a broad question. Go ahead.
I would confirm what Sheila said. I had a number of constituents contact me as a counselor over the summer, and the understanding that generally about an empowered or elected civilian review board. This was the thing that a lot of people were advocating for at the time. I researched it. There are no elected civilian review boards in the country. Excuse me, there's one. Berkeley, California has one.
That's surprising.
There are empowered civilian review boards. I spoke to Chief Haig. He's not completely against the idea, but pointed out that Springfield has struggled to implement the idea. But what I wanted to confirm or agree with Sheila's general overview of was that the activists I've talked to, they have deprioritized this aspect, and my understanding is that they feel it doesn't go far enough. So at that point, I said, "Well, I guess I can't work with you on this." But I would think about this issue from the police side of things and imagine that they are in the right. Imagine that there is a civilian complaint of officer misconduct, but the officer is innocent, and the Public Safety Commission investigates and finds the officer to be innocent. How, when they present that finding, does that actually quell any citizen unrest around this incident to say that we, the Public Safety Commission, investigated, we charged our chief of police to investigate the incident of one of his officers, and he found the officer to be innocent? I don't think that that finding in a worst case scenario would quell any unrest. So that's always been my my worry, imagining a worst case scenario. And that's all I'll say for now.
Alan.
Yes, I think because currently there or in recent years there have not been significant complaints against the police and underuse of force, et cetera, because that's been the case does not mean we shouldn't look to the future and the possibility of receiving those complaints, and that an independent review board makes more sense than leaving it to the Public Safety Commission. I would just say that I believe Christine, the last meeting or sometime recently said, that we shouldn't just be looking to change what's broken, but we should also be looking to the future for what may be needed in the future. And the idea that we could never have a complaint such as that is not reasonable to me. So I think that being prepared for that with an independent board makes the most sense.
Thank you. Chris, were you going to say something?
Yeah, but Alan beat me to it, so.
So let's talk about, let me talk for a second. I don't recognize, yes, David.
David, go ahead. I recognize you, David.
Sometimes I don't recognize myself, so I'm really glad that you said it. Let's think about what would be the objective, what would be the goal of this body. We're thinking of situations, but what would be the goal of it? And then once we have the goal, how would we get to that goal? Alan, you think you have an answer to that question?
Well, I mean, the goal would be to have a truly independent assessment of an incident which did not necessarily include people who have some beholden interest in the group that's being investigated. So that would be the goal. That's what I would think would be the goal.
Okay, thank you. That's clear.
David, just a little bit. Oh,
Sheila, is that okay if Sheila you wanted to talk and John wants to talk? Chris, let me let those guys add there. Go ahead, Sheila.
sure.
So I was going to say that I feel like this is an elephant in the room, and I don't think that everyone has the same experience that I do. But like as a city councilor, people do talk to me about their experiences. And last year when I ran for mayor, like the stories that people told me were just like I could stand on someone's porch and a perfect stranger would tell me
Oh,
Oh, the police just knocked you out.
yep.
Hear me now.
Yes,
guys hear
we
me?
can hear you now.
Yeah.
Okay, if so, this is John's fault if you guys can't hear me well. I just turned my video off. So I have people who come to me as their counselor, and they bring issues to my attention. And then last year when I was running for mayor, I had people like divulging some things that I could not even believe that someone would tell a stranger standing on their front porch, you know? And I did hear some stories about certain members of our police department. And I've been hearing these rumors for a long time, so I'm surprised that anyone would say that this is not a problem in Greenfield. This could just be the neighborhood I live in. It could be generational. It could just be my position. But there are we've got some skeletons in our closet, you know, and they need to be addressed, and they need to be addressed fairly. So that's,
Okay. So
what I'll say.
if you have, go ahead, John.
Well, first of all, this is clearly a WebEx problem and not a GSET problem, Sheila. So,
Okay.
I'm happy to help you with that.
I love GSET. I haven't posted on Facebook about GSET in a while, but I do love you guys. You guys save me so much money. I'm taking you for granted. I've had you too long.
Yes, well, so the serious point I want to make is that these kind of discussions, I am completely on board with people being heard in a way that they're comfortable. But for the sake of anybody who would ever serve on an independent group, board, commission, whatever you want to call it like this, there has to be incredibly detailed and thorough thinking about the point where hearing someone be able to make an accusation or reveal something or share a story in a private moment turns into something that people want public action upon, then you have to start thinking, does this group have the power to investigate? Do people who are then accused have a power to answer back? I agree that this is a good idea, but this is one of those things where the execution better be flawless, or
Yes.
you will end up with conflicting. What happens when this board says the police chief is lying, this person really did do it? What is the mechanism for resolving that? What legal weight do these accusations and the actions of this committee have? This is the kind of thing where I totally agree with the idea, but the implementation of this in the real world, the possibility for abuse. I mean, we're all living through a moment where people are using power to hurl unfounded accusations at other people politically in this country. I think there has to be a really serious and lengthy review of how something like this would actually work, because I want people to not be afraid to share. I think the idea that there could be retaliation is not a fantasy that people are making up in their heads. I think it's real. But how that turns into an actual public action that has consequences within municipal government, that is a huge question. And the definitions that have to be involved in that, if this was ever anything that the Charter Commission could recommend, I just don't think I could vote for anything other than like a study. And there would have to be some really serious ground rules, because I'm afraid I just see such a potential for abuse, or such a potential for overlapping responsibilities and unclear lines of authority, that you may end up hurting the people you're trying to help, which is the last thing that anybody wants to do. But this is a really prickly, difficult subject. And I think that as a charter commission group, we have to be really, really careful about something like this. So,
Right. And another concern that I have, like half of my family are deadheads and the other half are police officers. So we have like really interesting holidays. And the last thing that I want to see is like my cousin in Lowell to be accused of police brutality because he, pulled someone over and, they broke a nail while I mean, I don't want to see people using this what do you call it with when people just like sue over anything? David, you must know this word. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Frivolous.
Litigious.
Yes. Right. Thank you.
Litigious.
It's been a long day and it's Monday. I don't want people to use this frivolously, like, oh, the police officer, pulled me over while I was drinking and driving and I didn't like the way they talked to me about like this really ought to be used for serious cases where it's absolute malfeasance, It shouldn't be, someone scraped their knee while running away from the police and now all of a sudden we can sue the city, right?
So
But
Oh,
we
very
also need to like recognize that there is this concerted effort in the country where they're trying, like white supremacist groups are actively telling their young men become police officers. We need to so we've got to strike a really delicate balance.
Go ahead, Alan. Thank you, Sheila. Thank you, John, also.
Yeah, I believe something like recommending a study makes the most sense. This is an issue that is incredibly contentious across the country in all different sizes of cities, et cetera. And there, may be effective independent review boards, or there's others which clearly are not. So the idea of somehow being able to study that process and look at all of those issues, it's probably a 10-year project anyway, to actually do it and manage to figure out who to appoint, what their powers would be, what the process would be, how it would affect civil service regulations, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I do believe that we should address it as a committee and recommend some action.
Thanks, Alan. I I feel the strength of your call for this. Go ahead, Chris.
So I'm looking over the article right now, and I'm going back in history, and I know, David, you'll remember this. There was a time when it wasn't, do we want our police in civil service? Do we want them out of civil service? Do we want the chief in? Do we want the chief out? Right now, I don't even know what the status of civil service is. And a lot of people were, I think the intent of this commission was to sort of level the playing field when it came to administrative process of police and fire. And it was giving the mayor an extra boost so that the mayor wouldn't be seen as being contrary when it came to promotion or appointment. There is, I think, a move right now for us to get out of civil service. If I'm not mistaken, the police want to go first. The firefighters haven't really made that decision yet. So I am looking at all aspects of this, at least the first part, down through, let's see, before F. And I'm looking at all of those, and that seems rather straightforward. It seems more like it's another personnel board, actually, is what it seems like to me. And they're assisting with the hiring, the firing, and the promotional process and everything else, so that there would be no aspersions on the mayor promoting her favorites or whatever. But then the other piece that's the one everybody's been talking to tonight is the complaint process. Right now, if you want to complain, you can only complain to A, the mayor, B, the fire chief, C, the police chief, or you can complain to your counselors. So there's no sort of consolidated place in which complaints can be filed and taken seriously. I agree with everybody. We need an independent assessment of all of this, and maybe it's a study piece, but I'm going to just offer this up. In process where there's a written complaint that's filed and nothing seems to be happening to it, or it's given to chiefs and then it disappears, is there a way that the mayor can call upon an independent review committee, of which she would appoint 3 people, whatever, to actually sit in and hear? And of course, a lot of this is going to go on in executive session because you've got people's reputations and stuff at stake. So I'm just going to throw that out. It may not be very doable. I did have one other comment on this standard, if I could. It is after when it says meetings, it says 1. Let me just see where I've got this here. This is in powers and duties, goes all the way down, and then it goes 1. The commission shall meet on a regular basis. This is what Aaron brought up before. What does that mean? Is it regular for them to meet once a month? Is it regular for them to, so I'm suggesting maybe some language to say meet on a regular basis at least once a month or with a monthly meeting. I'd like to see them a little bit more engaged in the community on a regular basis.
Thank you. All right, I do have something to say now again. So let's make an analogy that I was surprised, Chris, that you didn't make it, which is that the last charter changed. We added a mayor's task force against domestic violence. And once upon a time, domestic violence was something that had the same problems, maybe not to the same degree, but the same problems, or maybe they are the same degree, that we have now with the idea of complaining against police officers or fire department people. So let's just step back to what we're trying to do. So we could either enable something to happen by suggestion in the charter, and the committee, the task force is an enabling on the highest level, which Chris, many women, including Chris Forgy, asked to be put in there. It's also an ordinance. And I agree with with what Alan is saying in terms of, and of course Sheila and the others, but the idea that it's something that needs to happen. And Sheila, you presented it based on your own experience. And Alan is talking about it in like to codify it. I don't think there's anything wrong with putting out from this commission that something like this needs to happen. And if you read again, there shall be a mayor's task force for what? For independent review, whatever you want to call it. I mean, we don't have to necessarily go that far without certainly letting all the department, everybody know that this is coming out of this group. But it's an advisory group, and that's it. If you read the whole section, it's an advisory group. And by the time this group was created, domestic violence task force had become, there was a whole, there's a whole group of people in this community that are involved with that. And this was kind of the culmination of that. What we're talking about is something from the beginning. Like, how do we begin this? How do we get it off the ground? What would it look like? Would it be a partnership with nonprofit groups to help people that are having, I really think that we should recommend on some level that something happen with respect to this idea. And it could be an ordinance, it could be a task force, but I'm going to put on the council, because we're just an advisory group, that something has to come out of this. And all the protection that John's talking about will be handled in that discussion. And the idea for Sheila that, she went around campaigning and everybody had a story. If there's that many stories out there, there's a problem. And it doesn't mean that the stories have to be made public. It doesn't mean that the task force has to do anything with them. But I think the idea that there's at least a check and a balance to abusive behavior at a level where people are carrying guns and, you know, whatever, I support that. And so I mean, we don't have to vote on it tonight, but if we come back on it, I think we should make a recommendation that this should be explored. We don't have to make a recommendation that there be a charter provision, but at least be explored. Yes, Al.
Yeah, I would just say that maybe in the language we can specify either an advisory group or a group with actual power, because an advisory group at the level of complaints against police don't hold, there's no power there. And so it could be an advisory group, or it could be an actual review board with powers.
The complexity of a review board with those powers would be unbelievably complicated.
Right.
I have a
The only person that really has the power today to do this stuff is the mayor. The mayor
I agree with that. It's unbelievably complicated, and yet it probably needs to happen. It's an extremely hard job. It's almost impossible. As I say, I believe if you look across the country, there are, review boards, and the number of people who are satisfied with those, if you're looking at both one side, which would be the police or other departments, and then the public, the amount of boards that satisfy both areas are very few, probably. But again, I don't think the complexity of it should deter us from saying, look at it, try it.
I agree. I'm just pointing it out.
I have a question.
I'm sorry, I can't see you, Sheila. Go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question and a suggestion. So I'm thinking that it might be good for this to be part of the Human Rights Commission, which is not addressed in our charter at all.
I was thinking the same thing, by the way.
Well, great. Great minds think alike. And then another question that I had was, would this be more appropriate for the city council to take up instead of the Charter Review Commission? Because it sounds like maybe this is something where we want to talk about it in an ordinance that has a little more flexibility, so that if we realize something's not working, we can go back and change that ordinance much more quickly than we can here.
From a political point of view, I'll put it this way. So let's say there's a groundswell of people who think that this group needs to be formed. The council can't really prevent that from happening, because people could petition the council to put it on the ballot, and it would happen. Whereas an ordinance is totally within the control of the city council to decide whether politically they think it's okay or not to do. So that's why the charter review is a recommendation that either the city council and the mayor can agree on, or it goes to referendum. So I'm thinking along the lines of what you're saying, Sheila, but to broaden it to include Alan's, a recommendation that this has to be taken seriously, and something needs to be done. And it could either happen at the council level, or it could happen as a groundswell of people asking this to be put on a referendum. So at least we would, give it not our approval, but we'd give it credibility. Because I don't think we can, if we keep talking, we're just going to bring up more weed stuff that we can't handle. But I just want to understand the power piece, that if the city council's in charge of it, if they don't have the political will to do it, then they won't pass an ordinance. You won't pass an ordinance. But that doesn't mean the citizens can't decide themselves, which really, we're the group that's looking out for the entire citizen group of this community, and trying to suggest whether these kinds of things should be taken seriously or I personally think they should be. This should be taken seriously, but we don't need to, thankfully, have any other answers except to say that. So, can we leave it at that? Alan, you okay with that? Because you were the strongest person. She okay with that?
I think for tonight, yeah, because we are going to have other meetings.
Okay. Yes. Okay, but as I said, it would be just it would be a paragraph. It would just say that we think this is important. This would that's it. I don't think. But okay, we'll come back to it. All right.
Can I say one thing?
Who's that?
That's Aaron.
Hi, Aaron. Yes, I can't see you. Sorry.
I still do think that some discussion should be had, especially if ultimately we decide to simply make a recommendation that a task force needs to be put together, or a review board of some sort, that the council needs, or the mayor needs to initiate that. But I still do think there is merit to discuss the makeup of the Public Safety Commission and whether that needs to be further defined. I think we heard that from some of the comments at our open meeting, and we heard that in some emails, I think. And so, how many retired public safety officers there can be as a part of that group? I know there's a limitation of how long before they can serve, but I think we heard that multiple times of, there should be a limit, and some people on the board should not be. And, should there be other requirements of people, whether demographic requirements, or people in certain types of careers, or members of other boards like the opioid or the courthouse. I don't totally know. And I know that's the difficulty of this, is that we don't know all of this, but I do think it's worth discussing that, especially if we're going to leave this section somewhat as is, because that section 4E is I think what really needs a broader demographic of people on that board if this stays the same. And I also had one question too, is there an ombudsperson in city government, either in the HR department or in the police or fire departments, or does that not exist?
I don't know the answer. Chris, do you know the answer?
HR was always, that function was always within the HR department. But I'm thinking right about now, there's nobody specifically dedicated to that in any of those departments, unless somebody knows something I don't know, which is usually Otis, because he's really up to date on everything. So go ahead.
I was trying to find the language, but when there's a civilian complaint is brought to the Public Safety Commission, then the chief of police is charged with investigating it. There's no one that I know of within City Hall that would do that investigation.
May I comment on Aaron's
Yes.
Aaron's point, which is a good one. I do believe that the makeup of the Public Safety Commission really needs to change. How do you codify that in charter language? For instance, in the task force against domestic violence, there are certain appointments the mayor makes, and then some of the others, because it's an advisory group, the mayor recruits them from different organizations and entities around the city. Not everybody on that board has to be a resident of the city. So I don't know, how do we do that? I guess my question is. And, because you can't really say, we should have 2 women and, you know, um, 2 minority folks and 2 public safety people and, that kind of thing, because it gets tricky trying to find those people to appoint. So I don't know how you get around the language except to put it as strongly suggestive as possible that the mayor seek, cross-section of population when filling vacancies, and give preference to, certain folks, and identify the people that you want.
Aaron, I'm really grateful that you added that to the discussion. Aaron, do you have any idea yourself about how you would propose language in the charter to change? Because it doesn't. It seems like there'd be not so many words, but the impact of the words would be tremendous. Because as you were saying, if the commission already has the ability to review complaints and is a better cross section of the community, could that not be a good place to start making sure that these complaints are heard in a different light? So, not trying to put you on the spot, that you were thoughtful about it. I think it's important. I'm glad you refocused us back to the fact that that's a provision that exists and it could be strengthened.
Yeah, I mean, I do think if you take steps to ensure that there's more diversity on that commission and it's not filled with former employees, I do think it's an issue that then the investigation goes to the chief and only the chief. But I think making the commission more diverse, you could limit it to, I mean, if we made it 7 if it's made 7 members as Councillor Forgy suggested, then 2 or 3 being the maximum number of former public safety officials. I could envision there being some other commissions or local agencies that we made sure had a representative on the commission. Potentially, I'd have to think about it more, I guess. And I know it's hard to say, oh, you have to have women, you have to have, but could you say that it needs to represent a cross section of the town? And like the demographic makeup of the town. I don't know if you can say that. Yeah,
you get trapped if you put good words in and then you can't find people to be appointed, then you've violated your charter. So not that, but then you practically can't function. It's not like
right.
it's not like it shouldn't be that the charter is now frozen, but then on a practical level, and you start doing things for the wrong reasons. I'm okay. I'd like to finish 6 tonight. I'm okay, and I don't know what interest Sheila might have in this, but I know Alan's interested. If Aaron and Alan wanted to think about language for section, I'll give Sheila a break because I know she's so busy. For section, what was it? The section you talked about in terms of just making sure that there's a representation. So in the first, I think in A be written in a way that would be more specifically defining who has to be on the commission. And maybe there's other language out there in the world where maybe there's ways in which during the Voting Rights Act, they destroyed the provision the Supreme Court did, but before that, the states had to comply with certain requirements to make sure that they weren't doing certain things. I don't know if the analogy is there, but there must be some way in which the Justice Department over time has encouraged communities to have diverse representation in their government. And I'm sure there's something out there that we could follow, so that at least somebody who's really harmed could sue the city and say that they're not following their own charter, even if it was accidental. You know, I'm not looking for lawsuits, but it just puts out there that if we're not complying with our own charter in good faith, there's a problem.
Right.
So what's the good faith language that says that the mayor really has to make a good faith effort to do something? And the same thing could happen if that language is in there when people come before the charter for council for approval. The councilors could say, you know, you're a good person, but you don't, we don't have enough of other people on the commission. We're going to reject this appointment. You have to come back. So it adds places for other PowerPoints to make sure that we're following our own good faith statements. If the two, do you mind? I feel like I'm the teacher appointing the students to do their thing. You were both so interested in it. I would wonder if you could commiserate and come back to the commission with to our committee with something that you think would. Who's that?
Sorry, my husband's calling the kids down for food. Sorry.
Oh.
But so I know I appreciate you recognizing the my workload right now, but if people want to send something to me for like another set of eyes, I'm happy to look at it. I want to be an active participant in this group.
Okay. I don't have any. I mean, I'd like to put it on to the people who are most enthused. Go out and make it work. I'm open to it. Yeah, Sheila could be included. Alan, yes.
Yeah, I'm in my view, I don't believe you can make this section too specific, that it's just impossible to, I mean, even defining someone's ethnicity at this point is, up in the air. So to me, drafting a sentence or so that suggests that the commission should reflect the diversity of the community, or the mayor should seek to make the commission reflect the community itself. It would be possible, to put that in, but going beyond that, I don't think it makes any sense or is possible.
I agree. But even those words finely tuned would be good, because it would give the council the ability to block a nomination if the language, if the councilors felt that that the spirit of the charter wasn't being followed. It's not always so easy.
I definitely believe that even words that are unenforceable or but that are symbolic can make a difference in the direction of public officials. So I believe some direction such as that makes sense.
Good, thank you.
Yeah, and to that point, another one of my notes on this section is if we could remove the gendered pronouns so that maybe someday we can have a woman fire chief or a woman serve as police chief, that would be cool too.
Yeah, that's a whole nother, we haven't even talked about that. Yeah, I'm fine, that, absolutely. Okay. Library trustee.
The only thing I would say is Aaron, if you're there, that if you want to contact me to work on language for the initial paragraph, I'd be glad to do that.
Great. And I'd like to include Sheila too, so
Sure.
that the three of us.
Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect. So Sheila, Alan, and Aaron. Good. This is good discussion. Okay. Library trustee.
Section 6.12. There was two language changes that were suggested. It was, I believe, in yeah, I don't know. I'm sorry. It was in section A, I believe, and they wanted to add library board of trustees and mayor and library board of trustees. But I thought that wording was redundant because the whole article itself seems that everything that is done with the public library is done in coordination with the board of trustees and the mayor. So they're already collaborating. So I kind of felt that that was a bit redundant. The second piece had to do with the maintenance of the library, which was in 2E. They're looking to remove language may be transferred to a city central maintenance department by ordinance adopted by council. Again, if we're not going to remove that, we're going to acknowledge that the central maintenance exists within DPW. I think that that might be a moot point.
Okay.
Okay to move on?
Yeah, well, all right, it's 7:51. It's been a long meeting. I don't want to rush. I know the assessors, for example, might be, there's things coming up that might be involved. How are people feeling? You want to stop here and continue next meeting with this? I was thinking we'd meet in 2 weeks on a Monday again.
Mm-hmm.
I would. I'm on my 4th straight hour of Zoom meetings, and I'm
Okay, that's fine.
toast. So,
You're
so
gonna-
I'm kind of
you're gonna
done.
complain- John, you're going to complain after only 4 hours on Zoom?
Yes, I'm a wimp. I fully own it. I admit it.
I'll trade you.
Zoom wimp.
We still love you. All right. So the date would be not the 30th, but the
7th.
7th. I don't even
All right.
know if it's open, but I'm assuming it is. December 7th at 5. Everybody, 5:30 better? Sheila, I know you're fine.
Sheila.
Sure.
Can do 5:30.
Yeah, it's better for me.
Okay.
I can do 5:30 that week.
All right. So we've got 6 of us here. Everybody's good for that?
Yep. I am.
Hey,
I'm good.
this is a great group. I enjoy these meetings a lot. Okay. Have a wonderful holiday. See you on the 7th.
Yeah, same to everybody.
Motion to adjourn, 4G.
Second, Wheeler.
Second, no more.
Okay. All right, let me read down the list so we do this right. Councilor Gilmore, do you agree with that motion?
Aye.
Councilor Forgy?
Yes,
Oh, did Sheila second it, by the way?
yes.
She did. Okay. It's hard to hear, Sheila. Councilor Wheeler?
Yes.
Aaron?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Alan?
Yes.
David? Yes. All right.